Good afternoon, everybody. As I think we were just introduced, my name's Simon Manley. I'm the British Ambassador to Spain, and I'm delighted to be here again at South Summit, my third year here. Bigger and better every year. It's extraordinary. What amazing sort of sense of enthusiasm for startups you find walking around the summit this year. And I'm delighted, as you heard, to be joined on this stage by two giants of the worlds of journalism and education. Diego Alcázar, founder of IE Business School back in 1973, now president of IE Business School, of IE University and IE Foundation. And I think you all know the quality of the university, the quality of the business school, one of the world's best. And on my left, by John Reading, Chief Executive Officer of the Financial Times, and I think as British Ambassador I have to say the world's greatest newspaper, and need the world's newspaper. It's a great pleasure to be joined by the two of them, and there is of course a reason that there is a kind of a link here, I should say, and we'll come back to that a little bit later, in that the Financial Times and IE have between them a learning program, a corporate learning alliance. I think one of the interesting things I'd like to come back to is that synergy and potential between the worlds of journalism and education. But perhaps we can start, John. I mean, the FT, the world's greatest newspaper, but also one of the pioneers of the new digital world of journalism. You're one of the first in there. You've constantly been one of the most innovative. But is there still a role for a newspaper? And for how long do you see that there will be a pink paper sitting on the doormat of the world's business leaders?
Well, thank you, Simon, and it's really good to be here. So 10 years ago at a conference in New York, an innovation conference, I was asked if newspapers would be around in 10 years' time. And I said, yeah, I'm pretty confident. And kind of nobody in the room sort of believed me. There was a kind of like a suspension of belief. And I still think they have a role. I've just written a chapter for a book about why newspapers will still be around. And I don't plan on writing a correction, so I think they'll stay there. But I do think they will be of lesser importance in terms of volume. I think what happens when a new technology comes along, it's very easy to write the obituary of the previous technology. So, you know, when TV came along, everybody said, well, that's the end of radio. Actually, radio is a very vibrant medium right now, and I think newspapers also have their own particular quality. They have that serendipity factor. So digital is very good at telling you what you want to find out. You know, you ask it to give you a search result, you'll get a search result, but newspapers have that kind of broader dimension. What Donald Rumsfeld once said, things you don't know that you don't know. I don't often quote Donald Rumsfeld, but he was right on that occasion. That's
because he didn't know, right?
He didn't know. Yes. But our main view is that the most important thing is quality journalism. And if you produce quality journalism and provide that journalism through whatever platform or format the readers want, then you have a sustainable business model. So we're not religious, we're not hung up on any particular format, any particular form, but I personally believe that newspapers are robust. Most of our audience is now digital, so 2/3 of our audience is digital, and mobile is by far and away the fastest delivery channel for the FT. So I think our view is there is a portfolio of platforms that work very effectively for us and our readers, and that print is part of that. But you know, the real growth in future will be digital, and it will be mobile.
But how do you kind of make that quality journalism kind of stand out on digital platforms when you're in this extraordinary kind of world of the social networks in which people are sort of flooded by messages on Twitter, on Instagram, and all the rest? How does your journalism stand out? And how have you had to change the nature of FT journalism to deal with the global challenge?
You can either view technology and developments as a threat or an opportunity, and frankly, they're always both. So the threat is that there are lots of new platforms, people are turning to social media for news increasingly, but at the same time, it gives brands like the FT and newsrooms like the FT the opportunity to do quality journalism in new formats. So video, for example, is a very fast growing source or means of producing news for the FT. So I think what you have to do is to be creative and innovative, to embrace the new formats. but understanding that the core brand values of integrity, authority, accuracy, fairness are consistent across whatever platform and through whatever storytelling device there is. And when I started as a journalist a few years back, I just produced newspaper articles. And then nowadays, you look at the newsroom of the FT, they're doing videos, they're doing audio, they're doing social media. So it's a much more dynamic, productive, difficult job, frankly, than it was when I started.
Does that mean the world of the sort of foreign correspondent is over?
Not at all. No, I mean, we have a big and growing network of foreign correspondents. We're a global news organization, and then our readers want news from all points. It does mean, though, that our foreign correspondents are producing journalism and delivering journalism in ways that they didn't when I was a foreign correspondent many years ago. So it's video, social media, tweeting. It's the whole distribution package that they need to be, frankly, expert in.
And Diego, when you listen to John speaking about that transformation in the Financial Times over the last few years and what that's meant for their business model, how typical do you find that of the sort of the business models that your students are looking at these days? And how do you equip them for the sort of change that John's described in the newspaper world?
I think the model that John is pushing at FT is really very good. Even some minutes ago, we were talking about what we believe it will be the future of journalism related to big brands, very good brands, very recognized brands, and a delivery in some way as the FT is doing now. They send to the subscribers at least 4 times a day what is happening and what is the content of the best of the journal. They are producing very high quality content. They talk about what is relevant, and if you are interested in the content, in the whole content, you click and you have this content at your disposal. That means that the evolution will be, as we were talking, to have video, to introduce the different news, a very short one video, and then if you are interested in the whole content, you will click. This model is very good. I think it will be the journalism in the future, and that means also that the names that we are now using will be reduced very, very much. That, I think, is the normal path of the journals that we are, newspaper that we are now seeing and reading. But I would like to make a question, if you permit me, to the audience. Who in this room has bought a newspaper, bought, not received?
A physical paper newspaper.
Yes. You can raise your hand. Well, that's
not too bad.
Perhaps is 15% of the audience. That is great.
We like this audience.
Yes, it's really very important.
He's now going to check how many of you were buying the Financial Times, just to check that.
Yes.
We'll come back later and see if we increase the number. Financial
Times is a global newspaper, and I think he is one of the brands that are better.
And what's this doing, though, Diego? When you look at, with your colleagues at the curricula for IE Business School, or indeed IE University, all the courses, and you look at that sort of pace of change, what's that leading you to conclude about the sort of skills and experiences that the next generation of students, be they undergrads, postgrads, or business school students, need to have?
We have embraced some values that we believe they are extremely interesting. We have added to our main way, our main path. It's entrepreneurship. We believe that is extremely important. because we are going to do everything in an entrepreneurial way. Humanities, we believe in this area because makes people better. They can understand the rest of the humanity very, very well, and we recommend it to all the people. We believe that technology is changing all, but in the 5 to 10 years, the change will be enormous. We cannot believe how much we will change everything and change. And then we try to push our students, and we believe is one of the best qualities that they must have. And I think hard working is still a very important thing for the future. I believe in these type of qualities, and I think that makes people to succeed much better.
And John, perhaps looking at that same question from the kind of the perspective of the newspaper boss, when you look across the globe, and the companies that are succeeding, what do you see as the sort of the skills and experience that are kind of making for the best and the brightest in the next generation of business leaders?
So I think that clearly successful businesses now need to think beyond their borders. So there's that sort of global dimension. There's understanding the world beyond their borders. You have to trade, you have to invest, you have to frankly be aware that competition is going to come from any quarter. So that global perspective, I think, is extremely important. But I think that the pace of change in any industry, there are very few industries that are safe from disruption, maybe hairdressing, but very few others. And you have to really understand how technology can really change your business very quickly and at an accelerating pace. So I think this whole understanding of the need to respond quickly, the need to innovate, the need to be flexible, the need, therefore, to develop new management techniques, to empower teams to get on with it. Top-down is too slow nowadays. So you have to really train people to be innovative and to sort of learn and teach and manage themselves and small teams. So there's a whole range of subject matter, particularly around technology, but more important, I think, is learning how to respond effectively and quickly to sort of global change and disruption. And I think the other thing is just sort of relevance. One of the reasons we started the joint venture with IE and formed the Corporate Learning Alliance was when we researched into business schools, traditional business schools, we found that, frankly, the curriculum was rather out of date, it was rather stale, and it was what we call bias positive. It was sort of happy stories about successful businesses, because no company really wanted someone to do a case study of their biggest disaster. And of course, at the FT every day, we pretty much do write about biggest disasters, that's news. And that's relevant because you learn a lot more from failure than you do from success. So I think that currency and that ability to learn from real business experience, which isn't always a happy or comfortable experience, means that the curriculum and the agenda is much more relevant, and students learn better from that. Great line. You learn more from failure than you do from success. Very true for all organisations, I have to say, particularly true for the Foreign Service. Would one of you just like to say a little bit more about this Corporate Learning Alliance? I mean, it's a fascinating kind of bringing together of the two worlds of education, journalism. Kind of what led you to it, and kind of, could you just say a word more about what it brings to students, how it differs from some of the traditional offerings?
Yes, I believe the delivery of what's the content is quite different. We try to combine effectively what it is more academic thought, very adapted to the necessities, to the needs of the companies, and the possibility of all the journalists and editors of FT that they have a view of what is happening in the world. Because we believe in globalization. Now that everything, the Brexit or even the democracy is in some way jeopardized, we believe that the globalization, the democracy, as we have said, is very important, and this makes a huge possibility, mixing the academia with the possibilities of seeing the world by other side.
Yeah, I think that I've always felt there's been a very close and strong alignment between education and journalism. After all, both are fundamentally about providing information, a kind of education. So I think that there's a natural overlap. I think that providing reliable, quality information through the pages of a newspaper is actually material that's very valid and valuable through educational courses. And particularly for business education, I think that obviously the audiences are quite similar. Our audience is global business people. And obviously people studying business education are either existing or aspirational business people. So the audience, and you have to put the customer first always. And I think they are natural readers of the FT and they're natural students at business school.
Diego mentioned globalization, and you mentioned Brexit. And right at the beginning, before we were introduced, we were all introduced as disruptive forces. I'm not sure how disruptive we've been so far, but I mean,
we are interested in these things, but the disruption that technology will do everywhere makes perhaps all these very relevant.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we've been living through a year of quite extraordinary kind of challenges to the established kind of political order, whether you call it populism, whether you call it anti-globalization, or kind of the revolt against the elites. A lot of people have spoken about kind of a movement against experts. I mean, how does this challenge you, John, as a journalist and your paper?
So it's a pretty deep issue and very important. And it connects to some of the other themes we've been talking about, like social media, the big tech platforms. Because I think what we're seeing is more and more people are getting their news and information from social media sites. I was reading on the plane over a report by the Reuters Institute on digital media. And more than half of the survey that they did, more than half the people now use social media as a news source. Facebook in particular is a big news source. And if you take the 18 to 24-year-old cohort, about a quarter of them now say their primary source of news is social media. That's more now than TV. And this has big implications, obviously, for news publications. And actually, a lot of the people using social media for their news aren't really aware of the news brand behind it. So they think it's a Facebook, it's a story on Facebook. So this has a big sort of competitive challenge. Again, we think there's an opportunity because you can reach lots of new readers through these big platforms. But I think at a deeper level, there's some quite interesting changes there, because what you find, and certainly what I find on my own sort of Facebook feed, is you're getting content and news put to you by peers, by people who sort of feel the same way about the world that you do. And it's kind of a subtle thing, but it's quite profound, because what that means is it tends to sort of reinforce existing views, and you sort of come to trust or use more of the information from peers than from so-called experts. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because it reinforces views, it reinforces bias, it takes out some of the independent curation or editing that you get in a traditional news source. And I see this myself, whether it's Brexit or Trump or whatever's going on. I tend to get on my Facebook feed views of people like me, and I like them because they're like me. It's not necessarily healthy, because you should have challenge, you should have disruption to the way you think, and it's kind of subtle, but it's important.
How do you, within the kind of university sphere, ensure that your students are getting that sense of challenge, and that they themselves are not sort of perhaps locked into the view of their peer group, and that they're getting exposed to some of those different and distinct voices?
Well, I think that sometimes we are very worried about what social media is doing. But I think it's the same thing that newspaper did during the 19th century. And even at the beginning of the 19th century, the newspaper wanted to direct the Peninsular War through the newspaper, and Wellington really was very worried about. During the 19th century, in Madrid, there were 250 different newspapers. Everyone that wanted to do something, attack somebody, did this newspaper. And then, well, that brought the laws against libel and all this that makes an order. I think social media are distorting in some way the information, but they will be useful and they will at the end make a very important role as they are doing in information. They will take the information from this newspaper, from the people who are taking the content and so on. Sorry about because I have changed the question. And we go to the university. Well, at the university, we try to mix quality of intake. We believe it's very important with a challenging and very, in some way, tough way of learning, because we want a competitive challenge every week and so on. And I think that makes a very good path at the end. We try also to involve them in the entrepreneurial mindset, in the technology mindset, and so on.
You made a fascinating statistic there about the number of newspapers that there were here in Madrid in the mid-19th century. And you referred earlier to the fact that you expected there to be fewer newspapers or news organizations in the future. And there's quite a debate around this, isn't there? I mean, certainly a debate here in Spain. We're going to see a consolidation of the big newspapers. One of the things that struck me here in Spain versus the UK is the sheer number of digital news sites that there are out there competing against the digital forms of the main newspapers. What's your take, John, on whether it's on the global market, the UK market, Spanish market, about whether we will see consolidation, i.e. reduced number of news channels, or actually are we going to see a diversification?
I think in terms of traditional media, there'll probably be consolidation. We've already seen some casualties, and we've seen some merger and acquisition activity consolidating. But I think the real theme, the really big theme, is fragmentation and a lot of new players. You mentioned that there's lots of digital sites. In every country, you're seeing this explosion of new channels. And I think that's healthy and dynamic and leads to a lot of competition, leads to a lot of innovation. And what I think people often forget in this is that for the traditional news players themselves, of course, they can and do, and we are, reinventing themselves as sort of new digital media players. So it's not a static scenario at all. I think that, you know, the successful existing traditional news media brands will reinvent themselves, and they'll be doing mobile, they'll be doing video. So it's a very dynamic and complicated picture. And all you can say for sure is that it's a battle for survival. It's pretty intense. And those that do survive, I think, will have a very clear focus on what it is that makes them different and special. And that goes for any industry. If you can't identify very clearly what your differentiating factor is, you're really going to struggle. If you become a commodity or something general, you're going to find it very, very hard to secure, defend, and grow a loyal audience. So I think the question when you look across all of these digital channels is, what is it that makes them unique? And do they have enough that's special to become a habit? Because in the old days it was easy. Everyone had their newspaper. They maybe had 2 newspapers. You could pretty much identify who somebody was through their newspaper. Now on their mobiles, they've got hundreds of news sources. So how do each of those sources make sure that they have that habit with their readers, and that's the real challenge, I think.
And the answer to creating habit is?
Well, the answer to creating habit is there's lots of different means, but Diego mentioned one of them, which is that publishing through the day. So Diego is a good example. On his wrist, he has a watch, which provides, it's a Samsung watch, which provides, just before we came in, an FT story flashed up on the watch. So it's making
as if by magic.
As if by magic, yes. It had nothing to do with me. But I think it's making sure that frequency and that rhythm of publication, that you're constantly engaging in the right way at the right time with readers, is essential.
Do you agree with that? Do you, in terms of consolidation or fragmentation within the newspaper industry?
Well, I don't believe in concentration of newspaper, because many of them are dying, and nobody will take the possibility to concentrate. It's much more a concentration of the information in very few names that will provide the good content and analysis and everything. And that will survive, really. It's the fourth power, and it's needed in democracy. I think that the screen has changed dramatically, but the function is still necessary. And about the fragmentation, well, the fragmentation is the social media. They will be extremely important because all of us are constantly involved in this social media, but they will be a bit irrelevant in relation to the producers of content and analysis. It will be a part of the information. I send photographies, I send information to my friends or to somebody, but it is not so important as the one that they are doing, the editors and writers of the FT. I will be immediate. I will be very close to some things, and that also will help to a different way of information, of being informed.
And do you see, either of you, more sort of switchover? I mean, companies coming into the world of journalism from other fields, some of the tech companies transforming themselves into media companies with a brand that will be as strong as the FT's is today, or as País is here in Spain?
Yeah, I think one of the big themes is convergence, and the borders are breaking down, and that's good for traditional media because we get to play in other areas like TV and video and mobile, but equally it works the other way. But I would say, of course, and naturally I'm a little bit biased, but I think a lot of those players have no idea about editing and about quality journalism. That's not what they do. Journalism is a craft, and you can't just introduce it. You have to have a newsroom with a culture and experience and expertise that you can't just create or replicate.
Do you agree?
Yes, I think the most important relation of corporations and companies with the media, it was related in some part to the control that in many ways media do, and also the provide of financing through the advertisement. I think that in digital has not been completely found, but the progress is very big each year. I think more companies and corporations goes and advertise through the digital journals, newspapers. And that also will open new possibilities for the cooperation with between corporation and producer of multi-content. That is the name of the game.
John, Diego, it's been a real pleasure for me to be up here with the two of you, a really stimulating discussion about where we are in the world of digital journalism and the crossover between education and journalism. Thank you very much for being here this afternoon at the South Summit.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.